You think you've heard scary stories before, but these aren't legends. These aren't campfire tales. These are real. And once you know the truth, you'll never look at the world the same way again.
Story 1. The Girl Who Never Made It Home. Halloween is supposed to be the one night of the year where you can be anyone you want. Throw on a costume, go out with friends, and stay out until morning without worrying about classes or work. For a lot of people, it's harmless fun. Parties, music, cheap decorations, and sidewalks filled with people laughing in masks. But for one young woman in 2001, Halloween night turned into something else entirely, something no one has ever been able to explain. Her name was Cindy Song. She was 21, a junior at Penn State. Friends described her as fun, outgoing, and always up for a laugh. On October 31st, Cindy dressed up in a playful bunny costume. Pink top, white skirt, fuzzy ears. The kind of costume you'd see on dozens of college students at any party. Nothing unusual about it. She spent the night with friends, bouncing from one party to another, drinking, dancing, just enjoying herself. Everything about the night was completely normal. At least, that's what everyone thought. By around 2 a.m., she was tired. Her friends gave her a ride home and dropped her off at her apartment. That was it. The last confirmed sighting of her alive. When police searched later, they found her phone, her eyelashes, her makeup kit, even her backpack, all left behind inside. That detail chilled investigators, because it meant Cindy had made it home safely. She had stepped inside, dropped her things like she was ready to crash for the night. But then something made her leave again. Her keys and purse were missing. That was it. Which suggests she walked back out willingly. But why? And where would she go at 4 in the morning, in the freezing November air, still in a party costume? Think about that. You've just come home from a night out. You're exhausted, maybe a little buzzed, ready to sleep. You put your phone down, maybe take off your shoes. And then you step outside for just a second. Maybe you hear a knock at the door. Maybe you left something in the car. Maybe a friend called you from the street. You open the door. You step out, and then you never come back. That's what happened to Cindy. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, no screams reported by neighbors. It was like she walked into thin air. At first, theories were innocent. Maybe she went to grab food. There was a convenience store nearby that stayed open late, but no one ever saw her there. Others thought maybe she just wandered off and got lost in the woods. But searches turned up nothing. And then darker rumors started. Whispers that someone had been watching her, waiting, that the harmless Halloween atmosphere had been cover for something much more sinister. Months later, an informant came forward. He said a man named Hugo Selensky had bragged about keeping a young woman in his basement who looked just like Cindy. When Selensky was finally arrested, police discovered multiple bodies buried in his backyard. But there was never any solid link tying him to Cindy's disappearance. Just another lead that went cold. And that's what makes this story so terrifying. Cindy did everything right. She didn't wander off drunk by herself. She accepted a safe ride home. She was literally inside her apartment where she should have been safe. But somehow, something drew her back out. To this day, nobody knows what it was. Some people believe it was a stranger who lured her outside. Others think maybe it was someone she trusted. And some believe Cindy might have just stepped out for something as simple as air, and that was all it took for someone to grab her. Her body has never been found. No closure, no answers, just silence. And every year at Penn State, new students walk the same road Cindy walked. They party in the same neighborhoods. They laugh, they drink, they take rides home late at night, never realizing one of the school's darkest mysteries started exactly the same way. The detail that haunts people most is how relatable it is. Because who hasn't been there? Coming home late, tired, dropping your things inside, maybe hearing a sound outside and stepping out to check. We've all done it without thinking. Cindy did too. And for her, It was the last decision she ever made. So the next time you stumble in from a party, fumble with your keys, and think about stepping back out for just 1 second, remember Cindy Song, because she never made it back to bed, and whatever pulled her out into the cold that night is still unknown. Story 2. The Candyman Who Killed Halloween. Halloween has always come with warnings. Check your candy. Don't trust strangers. Parents say it every year, usually as a joke. Razor blades and apples, poison chocolate bars, most of it is urban legend. But in 1974, in a quiet Texas suburb, the nightmare became real. That year, a man named Ronald Clark O'Brien decided to use Halloween as cover for murder. He wasn't some random psychopath lurking in the shadows. He was a father, an ordinary dad, taking his children trick-or-treating, the kind of man you'd never suspect. But Ronald was drowning in debt, obsessed with money, and he came up with a plan so monstrous it would change Halloween forever. On the night of October 31st, Ronald took his 2 kids and some neighbor children door to door. Just like any other family, they laughed, collected candy, and walked through the neighborhood streets lit with jack-o'-lanterns. Nothing unusual. At least, not at first. When they got home, Ronald handed out special treats, giant pixie sticks, the kind of oversized candy every kid would be excited to get. But hidden inside was something deadly. Instead of sugar, he had laced the top 2 inches of the straws with potassium cyanide, enough poison to kill multiple adults, let alone children. He gave the poisoned candy to his own son, his daughter, and even to other neighborhood kids, just to make the deaths look random. That was his plan. His excuse. If multiple kids died, nobody would trace it back to him. That night, his 8-year-old son Timothy begged to eat one of the pixie sticks before bed. Ronald agreed, even helping him open it. Timothy poured the sweet powder into his mouth. Seconds later, he gagged. He said it tasted bitter. And then he started vomiting violently. His body convulsed. His father carried him into the bathroom. But it was too late. Within an hour, Timothy O'Brien was dead. Imagine that for a second. A little boy, dressed in his Halloween costume, poisoned by candy he trusted his dad to give him. The kind of candy all kids beg for. The kind of candy that should be harmless. When the story broke, chaos spread across the entire country. Parents rushed to tear open their kids' candy bags. Police officers went door to door, collecting sweets. For the first time, the urban legend of poisoned candy was real, and every parent believed their child could be next. But here's the detail that chills everyone the most. The other children never ate their pixie sticks. One boy had actually fallen asleep holding his, and his parents found it clutched in his hand, unopened. If he had eaten it, more children would have died that night. It didn't take long for investigators to piece it together. Ronald had recently taken out massive life insurance policies on both of his kids. He was behind on debt, desperate for cash. His own son's murder was supposed to be his payday. But instead, he was caught, and the world learned the truth. The so-called Candyman wasn't a stranger in a mask. He wasn't a creepy neighbor slipping poison into bowls. He was a father, the one person a child should be able to trust the most. Ronald Clark O'Brien was arrested, tried, and sentenced to death. On March 31st, 1984, nearly 10 years later, he was executed by lethal injection. He never admitted guilt, never apologized. To the end, he played the role of the innocent man, even as the world called him exactly what he was, the man who killed Halloween. And yet, the fear never left. To this day, every October, parents still check their kids' candy. They break open wrappers, search for tampering, and tell stories about the Candyman. Because the truth is, urban legends are easy to laugh at until one of them comes true. Halloween is supposed to be fun. Kids running door to door, laughing with pillowcases full of candy. But Ronald Clark O'Brien twisted that into something evil. He proved that sometimes the monster isn't hiding in the shadows. Sometimes he's the one holding your hand, walking beside you, smiling as he drops the poison into your bag. And that's the real terror of the Candyman case. Not just that a child died, not just that it spread panic, but that every parent since 1974 has wondered, just for a moment, as they dump candy onto the table, what if one of these isn't safe? What if one of these kills my kid? Because it happened once, and once was enough to ruin Halloween forever. Story 3. The decoration that wasn't. Halloween is the one night a year when reality blurs with make-believe. Skeletons hang from trees, bloody corpses slump across porches, and fake gravestones scatter lawns. You expect to see horror at every house, but you're never really afraid, because deep down, you know it's not real. That's the comfort of Halloween. That's the illusion. But in 2005, in a quiet neighborhood in Frederica, Delaware, that illusion shattered. On the morning of October 31st, early commuters noticed something hanging from the porch of a modest two-story home. A body, suspended by a rope. It swayed gently in the crisp autumn wind, its head tilted downward, pale arms dangling like broken branches, and people smiled. To every passerby, it looked like a Halloween prop, a darkly funny decoration, something meant to scare kids later that night. But it wasn't. It was real. The woman who lived there, a 42-year-old, had taken her own life sometime after midnight. Her body hung in plain view, not hidden away, not tucked in the shadows, but right there, exposed to the street, where anyone walking by could see. And people did see. For nearly 3 hours, neighbors walked past. Cars slowed, drivers stared, and then kept moving. Parents pointed it out to their kids, joking about how lifelike the decoration looked. Joggers trotted by, dogs barked, kids on bicycles pedaled past, and not one person stopped. Nobody thought it could actually be real. Because it was Halloween, and on Halloween, your brain plays tricks on you. It wasn't until almost 9 a.m. that someone finally picked up the phone. They said something about the figure didn't feel right. The stillness, the color of the skin. The police arrived, cut the body down, and confirmed what nobody wanted to believe. The neighborhood had spent hours laughing at a corpse. Imagine being one of those neighbors. You wake up, walk your child to school, point at the porch and laugh. Hours later, you find out you weren't looking at a prop. You were looking at death. That's what makes this story so chilling. Not just the act itself, but the way it fooled an entire community. People didn't just miss the truth, they dismissed it. They saw something horrifying and told themselves it has to be fake. And the scariest part, this wasn't an isolated case. In 2014, in Chillicothe, Ohio, drivers saw a man hanging from a chain-link fence near a busy road. Dozens passed him. Nobody called it in. Hours later, someone finally realized it wasn't a decoration. In California, in 2009, a man who died in his front yard went unnoticed for days. Children trick-or-treated past his body. Neighbors waved from across the street. People assumed it was a haunted house display. Every time, the same excuse repeats. It's Halloween. It must be decoration. That's why the Delaware case lingers. It forces you to ask yourself how many times you've done the same thing. Think about it. How many times have you seen something too real on Halloween? A figure slumped in a chair, a body swaying from a tree, a shadow standing perfectly still in a window. You glance, maybe you shiver, but then you keep walking. Because your brain tells you, don't worry, it's fake. It has to be fake. But what if it wasn't? That's the real horror. Not just that people die on Halloween, but that sometimes they die in plain sight, and nobody notices. Psychologists call it expectation bias. On Halloween, your brain is primed to expect tricks. So when you see something horrific, your mind automatically explains it away. You don't react. You don't intervene. And that's why these tragedies get missed. But here's the thought that sticks with you long after the story ends. What if you've already walked past something real? What if one of those decorations you saw last year wasn't a decoration at all? The Delaware woman's story isn't just a local tragedy. It's a reminder that horror doesn't need masks, makeup, or props. Sometimes it hangs in plain sight, and everyone walks by pretending not to see it. So the next time you're out on Halloween night, surrounded by glowing pumpkins, fake corpses, and eerie displays, stop for a moment. Look closer. Look at the figure hanging from the tree. Look at the slumped body on the porch. Watch the mannequin in the window that hasn't moved for hours. Because one day, somewhere, someone will walk past something real. They'll laugh. They'll point. They'll shrug it off as a joke. And they'll be wrong. Story 4. The Haunted House Fire. Halloween is supposed to be about safe fear. Haunted houses, jump scares, fog machines, fake skeletons. They're designed to make you scream, then laugh as you walk out. You pay for the ticket knowing the horror isn't real. That's what makes it fun. But in 1984, in Jackson Township, New Jersey, the line between illusion and reality vanished. And what was supposed to be a night of laughter turned into one of the deadliest amusement park tragedies in American history. The attraction was called the Haunted Castle, part of the Six Flags Great Adventure amusement park. It was made up of 17 interconnected trailers, dark, narrow, and disorienting. Inside, teenagers could wander through twisting hallways, bumping into costumed actors in rubber masks, listening to spooky music, watching strobe lights flicker. It was the perfect place to test your courage and laugh with your friends. On May 11th, hundreds of kids lined up to go inside. They joked nervously, daring each other not to scream. Parents waited outside near the concession stands, hearing the usual shrieks of excitement from the darkness. To everyone, it seemed like just another night at the park. But then, somewhere deep inside the attraction, someone lit a lighter. The cause was never confirmed. Investigators believed a teenager flicked the flame to see better in the dark maze. The problem was the building itself. The walls, ceilings, and props were made of cheap plywood, tar paper, and foam. The materials were not just flammable, they were fuel. Within seconds, flames spread across the wall like it had been waiting to burn. At first, nobody panicked. The first curls of smoke were thin, wispy, almost theatrical. The kids inside thought it was a fog machine. People outside saw haze rising from the structure and chuckled, assuming it was part of the show. Even the first screams, high-pitched, desperate, echoing through the trailers, were dismissed as acting. But the fire wasn't fake. It was real. And the haunted castle was a death trap. The narrow corridors filled with smoke. Lights flickered out. Strobe effects turned into disorienting bursts, blinding the teenagers trapped inside. They groped at the walls, searching for an exit, but the passageways twisted back on themselves. Exit doors were locked, padlocked, or hidden behind props. Panic spread faster than the flames. Groups of kids pushed and shoved, tripping over each other in the black smoke. Some tried to turn back, but the fire blocked the path. Others screamed for help, pounding on the walls, while their voices were swallowed by the roar of the fire. Outside, the crowd gathered. Parents heard the shrieks and clapping inside and thought the kids were just being dramatic. One witness later said they thought the banging on the walls was part of the performance. For several minutes, nobody understood that what they were seeing was not an act. By the time realization hit, it was too late. 8 teenagers were trapped inside. They never made it out. Their bodies were later found, clustered in corners and hallways, huddled together where they had tried to escape the flames. Firefighters described the scene as one of the most horrifying they had ever entered. melted props, collapsed walls, and the unmistakable stench of burned plastic mixed with human flesh. The aftermath was chaos. Sirens screamed. Parents collapsed in shock. Reporters swarmed the scene as images of the charred remains of the castle played on TV screens across America. The safe scare had turned into a national nightmare, and the question everyone asked was, how could this have happened? The investigation revealed shocking negligence. The haunted castle had no sprinklers, no smoke alarms, no fire extinguishers. Emergency exits were blocked or chained shut. It had been thrown together quickly, meant to thrill customers, with almost no thought given to safety. The families of the victims demanded justice. They wanted someone to answer for the loss of their children. Six Flags pointed fingers at the teenagers, suggesting they had caused the fire. The families pointed back at Six Flags, saying the tragedy was inevitable, given how dangerous the structure was. The trial dragged on, but in the end, the park was acquitted of criminal charges. For the grieving families, it didn't matter. Nothing could erase what had happened in those smoke-filled hallways, and that's what makes this story unforgettable. Haunted houses are supposed to be illusions. You scream, but you know you're safe. You walk in laughing, and you expect to walk out laughing again. That's the unspoken promise of Halloween. But in 1984, that promise was broken. For those 8 kids, the heat, the smoke, the terror weren't part of the show. They were real. They died in the very place they paid to be scared. Trapped in a haunted house that became a tomb. Even now, decades later, the story lingers like smoke in the back of your mind. The next time you step into a haunted attraction, the next time you hear screams echoing through the dark, you'll wonder, are they actors or are they real? Is that fog or is it smoke? If a fire broke out right now, would you even know until it was too late? Because once, on a night in New Jersey, the screams weren't entertainment. The fire wasn't an illusion. The horror wasn't fake. It was real, and nobody saw it until it was too late.
They say nightmares end when you wake up, but some begin the moment you open your eyes.